Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sword and Siege Crusades Book I. Today, we're going to take a look at the battles of the First Crusade, which are the beginning battles in the new game. This is going to be pretty much an overview of what to expect. We're going to take a look at the maps, we're going to take a look at some possible strategies and the opposing forces. So let's go ahead and without further ado, we'll get started. Now, in total here, the game comes with 64 scenarios, and the first crusade ends with scenario number 20. Now, the first scenario that you come across is the get started scenario, followed by 5 training scenarios. So the first battle of the first crusade is the Siege of Nicaea. So let's take a quick look at that. We're just going to open it up. We're not going to try to play anything here, but here we have the 2D version. And this is the zoom in. Let's kind of zoom out a little bit here so you can kind of get a closer look at the layout. You'll see that the Muslims are ready and raring to defend their city against the oncoming Crusaders. If we zoom out a little bit more, we can see where the Crusaders are coming from. So they're coming in 2 columns from the south and 1 column here from the north, along with some blockading ships. Now, in this scenario, the ships will not move. They're there to represent a continuation of the blockade by sea. Earlier in the crusade, or in this siege, the Muslims were able to reinforce the city by sea, and the Crusaders were needing to fully isolate the city. So the Byzantines were able to bring ships over into the lake, which is Lake Ascanius. Uh, they had to actually disassemble the ships, bring them over by land, and then reassemble them so they could bring them back into the water. And once they were able to do that, then the ships were able to effectively blockade the city. Now, in this particular scenario here, you're going to come across the fact that there are more units going to be arriving. Let's look at the schedule here for a moment. Now, there are 70 turns, so it's a fairly long scenario. The first Crusaders are going to finish coming on to the map there, starting in at let's see here, 6:20, and then the first Muslims are going to come in at 9:30 here. You'll see some mounted archers. They're going to come in on the far right-hand side of the map. They're going to be traveling down this road, and eventually they're going to encounter the Crusaders. Now, if you choose to play as a Crusader, one of the first things that you'll want to do here is isolate the gates. Let's take a look at the gates real quick here. I'm going to remove the flags, and I'm going to remove the units. And you can see the gates here, they're trimmed with red with black in the middle, and this will give access to the city. Now, as the owners of the flag, the Muslims can go in and out at will. Of course, they're probably going to encounter, if they try to go out, a large number of Crusaders. But the Crusaders cannot come in as long as the flag that represents the Seljuk Empire is over the gate. And to take the gate, they're going to have to, the Crusaders are going to have to um, venture onto the wall. And you see these square overlays on top of the wall here. Those are called towers. Those are tower hexes. And inside the towers are stairwells. So that gives the ability for anybody to go up onto the wall from the inside, or if they're already on top of the wall, to go back down into the interior. So let's say that you're a Crusader, you've managed to get onto the wall, maybe you got onto the wall from a siege tower. You fought your way onto one of these square tower hexes, and then you used a stairwell to venture into the interior. And then you march over into the um, stairwell here, and then you can, or rather, I'm sorry, you march over to the gate, and then you'll be able to effectively take over the that gate, and then anybody on the outside will be able to come through that gate and venture into the city, and hopefully you'll be able to take the city. Now there are some objectives in the city here, which you'll be able to take, as you can, and then you'll be able to let's just do something real quick here. I need to get my cursor up functioning here. All right, now, so let's go ahead and take a look at the map one more time. So you'll see here some flags on the right-hand side. You'll see their worth, which is 150 points here, 150 more points, and this hex, and then of course all of the gates are also worth victory points, and there's other flags on here as well. So you can see the different flags here. So you'll, as the Crusader, will need to defend against the um, the oncoming. Pardon my arrow here. It's kind of, I had it pointing in the right direction right now here, and now I'm trying to see if I can get rid of it here. So pardon me here just for a moment. All right, sorry about that. I had to get rid of that arrow there here. I'm just kind of new at some of these editing techniques, so pardon. Anyway, so you will have a chore, and we can go into 3D here and take a look at the various gates. And there's a citadel in the middle of the town, or city, I should say. And so you'll just need to overcome the defenders, venture into the city, and capture it. And then that'll be your first step to Jerusalem if you choose to play as the Crusader. So we're going to move on to the next battle here. So pardon me just for a moment. All right, so now following the Siege of Nicaea. By the way, there are 4 scenarios in the Siege of Nicaea. Um, One of them is this engagement where the forces are coming on slowly. There's another scenario here where basically they're pretty much already totally around the city. And then there's also another one here that is the just the scenario where Kilij Aslan, the Sultan of Arum, is going to try to take on the Crusaders, and you can see that he's maneuvered down the road. He's formed up his troops, and he's ready to take on the Crusaders here. So there's this kind of a standalone battle during the middle of the siege. You can kind of see different scenes here. This is the 2D zoom out, a little closer, and then the 2D zoom in. And then, of course, we can go to 3D, and then the 3D zoom in as well. Okay. So anyway, that's the Siege of Nicaea. And then let's kind of go back to where we were going to the next battle in the First Crusade, which was the Battle of Dorylaeum. Now there's 2 battles of Dorylaeum here. One is 32 turns and one is 18 turns. The 32 turn scenario is kind of a meeting engagement, at least on the part of the Crusaders. Most of them are going to start off the map, and then they're going to kind of slowly trickle in. You've got the vanguard that'll start on the map already, and then you'll have Kilij Aslan wanting to get revenge for his defeat of Nicaea. And then the Crusaders will come in and try to defend themselves. In the second scenario, let me just kind of click on that one so you can so you can take a look at it here. You can see that the Crusaders have formed a defensive larger, for lack of a better word. And if I pull out a little bit here, you can see where the Muslims are basically surrounding the Crusaders on 3 sides. And Raymond, um, yeah, well, I'm sorry, Count Bohemond, sorry, is going to lead a cavalry charge, if you so desire, against the Muslims in this direction. If they are lucky, they can do some damage to the Muslims, but they may have to end up retreating back because, well, there's a lot of Muslims wanting revenge, and a lot of them are mounted archers. Some of them are mounted spear, and we'll just kind of have to see what is necessary. All right, so what we're going to do now is let's take a look at the next scenario. All right, now in the next group of battles is going to involve the Siege of Antioch. You can see that there are 4 scenarios involving the Siege of Antioch. There's the Battle of Lake Antioch, which is not exactly around the city itself. It's off to the east a little ways, and the Crusaders are going to try to intercept a relieving force to prevent them from coming into and relieving the besieged Muslims in Antioch. The other two scenarios are basically a climatic battle of a post-siege of Antioch. In other words, the Crusaders have had their fortunes reversed. Instead of they themselves being the besiegers, they become the besieged. And this scenario here is a post-successful siege by the Crusaders of Antioch. So you can see they're already in the city. And they control most of it, except for the citadel over here. If you take a look at the citadel, you'll notice here that the Muslims still control the citadel. But the basic part of the city itself is no longer in control by the Muslims. It is controlled by the Crusaders. And now the Crusaders, having achieved a victory in terms of taking the city, now have to defend their victory. But as you can see here that all around are the Muslims here, and they are intent on destroying the Crusaders in the city. So, and things were getting really desperate. You know, the food was running out because basically all the food was gone from the siege that they themselves were causing on the Muslims. So now when they get into the city, there's no more food because, well, it's already been eaten. So it doesn't take very long for food to be a severe problem for the Crusaders. And Kerboga, who is going to be the Seljuk wanting to retake Antioch, has simply decided to wait and starve them out. Which would have worked, except for Peter Bartholomew had the vision that there was a holy lance buried in the church in Antioch. So after a day or so of digging, he finds a piece of metal that he is going to reveal um, as the Holy Lance. And when we say the Holy Lance, we're talking about the lance that the Romans used to pierce the side of Christ on the cross, which is a very important relic to these religious zealots of the Crusaders. So they are going to use that as a sign from heaven that they are going to prevail in this battle. So they are going to basically march out in the very early hours of pre-dawn on the 28th of June in 1098, and they are going to do their best to attack the Muslims. Now, when the battle began, Kerboga was pretty much not really interested. He's wondering why everybody's waking him up. His thought is, well, let the Crusaders come out here. You know, they can do all they want to do because we outnumber them and we're going to crush them. Was his feeling on the whole thing. So that didn't really work out too well for him because as soon as the Crusaders got into their, you know, charging mode and ready to take on the Muslims here, there's really not a whole lot that Kerboga can do because, well, he's kind of outside the realm of things here. Where he's going to find himself at the northern part of the battlefield, way up in here. So he really doesn't have much control over the battle. Um, Now, this scenario here is pretty much the way it's going to look before the Crusaders are very much out of the city. If we want to look at the next scenario, it's going to look a little different here because the Crusaders are going to be mostly outside the city now, and they are going to be fully. Oops, wrong button there, guys. Okay, they're going to be fully in line of battle here, ready to take on the Muslims. So they're going to attack from all different sides. You know, we have attacks in this direction, in this direction, in this direction, and so on, and all the way up to, if they can find it, Kerboga. Now, amongst the scenarios that I included for the siege of Antioch is a small scenario, 12 turns, and basically what it is the actual uh, over the wall, uh, because inside the city was a converted Christian to a Muslim who had lost faith in the Muslim army, and after months of negotiations had decided to side with the Crusaders. So on the night of June 3rd, in in the very early hours of the morning. The scenario starts at 3:50, so it's totally night. In fact, the entire scenario is going to be night. So you're already going to start on the wall here because the traitor to the Muslims here has already lowered the rope, which is going to allow Bohemond here to scale the wall. Now you can see here Firuz, who was the Muslim, uh, lowered the rope to Bohemond here. He and his 60 men here climb up the wall here, kill the Muslims, and enter into the gate, opening the gate, and then the other waiting Crusaders will charge through the gate. Count Robert of Flanders and Godfrey of Bouillon. Their men are going to march through the wall. You'll notice that there's some other Crusaders, but they're really just eye candy. These are the men of Tancred. They're not going to take part in this part of the battle because this is only the opening of the gate and the penetration into the city itself. The goal of the Crusaders here is to go into this upper right-hand corner, and you'll see that there's a Crusader flag here that represents an exit hex for the Crusaders. So the only way for the Crusaders to win is to traverse the city, kill as many Muslims as they can, defenders, capture these victory um, point flags, these objective hexes, and then get to the exit hex, and then they're going to remove as many units as they can before time runs out. And hopefully they'll acquire the number of points necessary. They need a total of 300 points more than the Muslims can can accumulate. And if they can do that, then they win the game here. Now they only have 12 turns to do it, so they're going to have to book. I mean, they're going to have to really get in a hurry to do this. So time is of the essence. But anyway, that is pretty much the battles that cover the siege of Antioch. All right, now here we are in the next battle in the lineup of the First Crusade battles. So following the siege of Antioch, a few months later, there was the siege of Marat al-Numan. Now, Marat al-Numan here is an interesting case here because supposedly here, and I'm not sure I really believe this here, but supposedly here the Crusaders, after a successful siege, um, we're starving yet again. Seems like starvation seems to be a theme here. But anyway, they ran out of food, and in order to survive, they were forced to take meat off dead Muslims and eat their flesh. So there's a story of cannibalism here. I'm not sure I really believe that because the Muslims themselves never wrote that part down. It was part of the Christian chronicle, not the Muslim chronicle. So you would think if it actually happened, the Muslims would have been all over that and writing about how devilish the Crusaders were in that they were participants in cannibalism. Um, I think it was more of a story here to scare other towns and villages to surrender very quickly, because the Crusaders were so intent on accomplishing their mission they would do anything, and that includes eating Muslims. I don't know whether it's true or not here, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's probably not true. But anyway, here we can take a look at the map real quick. You can see that oh, now by the way, I changed the 2D images from the graphical to the alternative here, and you can kind of see these are silhouettes. If you like looking at silhouettes, you can get a different type of 2D version, and we also have NATO images as well, or NATO-ish images here, and I'll show you those here in just a few moments. But in this battle here, you're going to have to surround the city, cause it to be isolated. Now, I haven't talked about that just yet. I have talked about it in other videos. But the important thing to recall about isolation is you have to take out, or rather, you have to surround it and cut off all access to and through the gates. Now you can see the gates on the walls here are represented by the flags. If I zoom in a little bit here and remove the soldiers and remove the flags, again you can see the gates have the trim red with the interior black. So if you can, as a crusader, if you choose to be the crusaders here, you'll need to occupy these various hexes with zones of control. If you can do that, then you'll be able to knock off the access and supply routes into the city, causing all the occupants to become um, isolated. And once they are isolated, it's going to make your job as the crusader much easier, and because the battles are going to be won due to the impact of isolation. So make sure you look at the user manual so you can have a full understanding of what isolation actually means. So this is the map zoomed out here. Now there's two versions of this scenario. There's the straight up siege scenario here where all the Muslims are inside the city. And don't forget that as long as they control the gates, the Muslims can sally out from the gates and attack unsuspecting crusaders. So don't be complacent here if you're a crusader, because it's very possible that the Muslims will sally out and attack you if you are, just lazy in your defense. But we can see later on how that might impact the battle as a whole here. Now, there's another version of this battle here where there's going to be Muslims coming in from the east. So there'll be a column of Muslims. And then, so the crusading forces here will have to divert some energy from the actual siege itself to intercept and prevent the successful relief of the city of Marat al-Numan. Now, from Marat al-Numan, let's go on to the next battle in the First Crusade. All right, now here we come to the next battle, major battle in the First Crusade, and it is going to be the Crusader siege of Jerusalem in July of 1099, roughly 2 years or almost 3 years, really. After the crusade began in late 1096, the siege of Nicaea was 1097, and here we are in 1099. July 15th. This is basically going to be the last day of the siege from the historical dates, because we're not going to try to recreate sieges from day one and all the way to the end. This was a relatively short, siege, because the siege of Antioch was 9 months. I believe the siege of Jerusalem was closer to 6 weeks, but this battle is going to take place on the last day, the climactic day of the siege, as do most of the sieges in the series. Now, this particular scenario here has 50 turns, so you have 50 turns to overtake the Muslims. You're going to have two main forces. You're going to have Godfrey and his forces coming in from the north, and you're going to have Raymond coming in from the south. Now you can see from this image, I've changed the 2D version again to the NATO images. Now these are sort of NATO-ish again here, okay, because you'll notice here that they don't have the traditional infantry and cavalry marks. They have more like bows and spears and axes. And this green symbol here, it represents some sappers, which you can see over on the left-hand side. We have a battering ram. We have some catapults. These little dot-looking things here. These are supposed to be an accumulation of stones, the kind of things that the catapults would throw at the walls. And then we also have a siege tower. We can move the leader off a little bit here so you can see the siege tower. Okay, so so you would move your siege equipment close to the city and start pounding the defenders here. Now, generally in a siege, you'll want to eradicate the defenders as much as possible. So you get in close with your archers and your mangonels and your other catapult weapons and try to eliminate or severely weaken the defenders on the walls as much as possible. That's going to give you, yeah, an easier time if you can get rid of these defenders. And then once you have done that, then you can, penetrate into the city. Now here we go. We're looking at the 3D zoom in, so you can see the catapults. These are mangonels, and again, you can see the siege tower. If we venture down into the city, you can get some close-ups of the defenders, and they also have their own siege engines too, by the way. They have, for example, their mangonels, and they're going to want to use them to defeat the Crusaders. So don't get in too close to those. Now, in this, because of the arc and the trajectory of the catapults, they cannot shoot at units right up against them. So if you can get right up against the wall, then the catapults cannot shoot back at you. Now, catapults too, by the way, because of their limitations in firing and reloading and such, they only fire offensively here. They will not fire defensively. So you will not have to worry about opportunity fire when it comes to enemy catapults or any catapult. Your catapults will not fire opportunity fire either. The map, by the way, shows a lot of detail here. You can see that it shows some of the important monuments and other areas of interest. You got the Holy Sepulchre Church. You have the Muslim quarter laid out, Jewish quarter, Armenian quarter, the Christian quarter, the Dome of the Rock, the various gates, the Jaffa Gate, Damascus Gate, Herod's Gate, Lion's Gate, and the Dung Gate. Kidron Valley, and if you venture north here, you can see the Grotto of Jeremiah, which was near the site of the crucifixion of Jesus. I wouldn't say there's an exact location, but this is what most people will say is the most probable area for the actual crucifixion. But anyway, it's all marked on the map here. So I hope you enjoy the scenario. The other scenario, by the way, of Jerusalem is where you're going to have the forces of Ascalon. The Fatimids were trying to gather an army that would come along the road and, if possible, here relieve Jerusalem before it fell. They didn't make it in time, so the city did in fact fall on July 15th, 1099. But the Fatimids did come to Ascalon. All right, now, so speaking of Ascalon, that's going to bring us to the last battle of the First Crusade. So let's go ahead and start bringing that up. There's only one version of that. And here we are at the Battle of Ascalon here. Now these green, which are the Muslims, and they are planted in the plain of Ascalon here, right outside the city of Ascalon itself. Now in this battle here, the Ascalon is not the subject of a siege. It simply happens to be the meeting point for the Fatimid navy bringing in the troops that they're going to use to relieve the city of Jerusalem. Unfortunately for the Muslims, they didn't get there in time and they were unable to influence the siege of Jerusalem. However, they think they have enough men that if they march to Jerusalem, they can retake the city. Now, when Godfrey, who now was elected as the leader of the crusade and the post-crusading period, he was the defender of the faith and defender of the Holy Sepulchre. Was his title. He didn't take on the title of king. He refused that title, by the way. His successor, Baldwin, will take on that title of king, but we'll save that story for another day. Anyway, With knowledge that the Fatimid army had assembled at Ascalon, Godfrey organized as many of the Crusaders as he could and marched toward Ascalon here. Now, the battle is going to start in a night turn, or rather in a dawn turn, so there's going to be 4 hexes of visibility here, but they're going to start out very close, so they've used the night to march in very close, and just as dawn was approaching here, they're going to be in close enough here that they will be able to surprise the Muslims, and they're going to strike with no mercy. Basically, here they're going to take out as many of the Muslims as they possibly can, and hope that they won't be able to mount any kind of counterattack. Now we're going to finish off this episode here with looking at the 2D graphical, and I just want to thank you again for listening. In this first episode of the overview of Crusades Book I, these were the battles of the First Crusade, the only truly successful crusade. There were some others that had some minor successes, but most of them were utter failures, complete failures. But at any rate, here, this First Crusade ends with the Battle of Ascalon and the successful destruction of the Fatimid army that was supposed to relieve or retake Jerusalem. So I thank you again for listening. Please tune in again when we get into the next episode where we're going to look at the other battles of this first book one of Crusades. But again, thank you for your kind attention, and you have a great rest of the day.